In this video, I'll look at setting up the rendering for my animation. I've got two cameras in here. Camera 2 in this view that does a slow zoom in on the bus stop. Camera 1 then does a crane up the side of the building, and I can use both in an animation or in a larger movie. For now though, I'm going to set up each camera to render, just to have a shot to look at. I'll press F10 or go to the render setup, and first I'm going to make sure the area to render is set to view. Then I'll go in the time and see how many frames I need. I'll start by rendering camera 2, so I'll put the range in at 0 to 96. As you can see here, we've got a lot of choices. Single frames, the active time segment, a selection of frames, and a range of frames. I'm going to make sure I've got the size right, 1280 by 720, and scrolling down, that I set a file. This is another reason why project setup is so important, that if we don't set the project, 3ds Max will throw the images wherever it thinks it should. I'll click on Files here for my project in the Render Output, and what it wants to do is browse over to my Futuristic City Street Render Output directory. There's an image I had rendered earlier in there as a test, just to see how it would work. Under Formats we can render. We've got all kinds of different things. There's AVI, a standardized movie format. Things like Cineon, for telescening or scanning film. OpenEXR, a flexible floating point compositing format developed at ILM. Standard ones like JPEG and QuickTime movies, for example. You may just wish to render out, let's say, a QuickTime movie of your work and be done. What you can also do, though, is to render out an image sequence, which can be handy for one very distinct reason. If for some reason the render hangs or the computer crashes and you're rendering an image sequence, you won't lose all your frames. If you're rendering a movie and the computer crashes, it may be gone. Typically what I'll also do is render out image sequences with additional channels, using perhaps EXR and putting in depth, Z-depth from the camera. That way I can take those images into a compositing program such as Autodesk Composite for post effects such as glow, depth of field, and blur. For now though, I'm going to set this up to render out as a Targa sequence. My thinking then is I'll render out these Targas and take them into an external program, maybe such as Adobe After Effects, to compress them into a movie of my choice, using the QuickTime compression I'd like. Again, I'm doing this as a safeguard, so that in case I have a crash, I don't lose everything. I'll name this file, and I'll call it City Shot B. Why B when it's camera 2? Because it's going to put a number afterwards, and some other compositing programs may have issues if a numbering system starts with 02001, for example. So I'll use letters to designate my shots and let the sequences after here be just the frame numbers. I'll click Save, and what it's going to do is pull up a control here for whatever kind of output I've selected. In this case, a Targa. You have some options here depending on what you'd like to do with it. For this test, I'll run 24-bit. There's no transparency, no alpha channel. If you'd like an alpha channel with it, you can run 32. If you want any metadata to come along with it, things that will be recognized by other programs and help you keep track of things, you can put it in. I'll click OK, and it's ready to render. I will do a few more checks in here before I get started. I'll jump over to the Renderer tab and just make sure the anti-aliasing looks good. I haven't changed it, and it's set from 1 to 4 as box. It's a decent anti-aliasing all over. I'm going to make sure that under indirect illumination, if I did or didn't have anything off or on, that it's set correctly. In this case, we've got Final Gather off, and so we're going to get a faster render with no extra bounce light, so I'm going to leave it alone. I'll check in processing, and this is an important one in Mental Ray especially, making sure that there's no override materials enabled, so we see the right colors. It looks like I'm ready to go, and one more time, check the range here, the file, and the camera. In this case, I'm running from Quad 4, Camera 2, and I'll hit render and probably wait a few hours. Realistically, in a render like this, anything under 20 minutes a frame is acceptable. So plan to do this, maybe when you're asleep. Get up in the morning and see how those renders run. I'll click render and check out the final movie when it's done in the next video.